Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everybody. Good morning. This is Lori Smith on Blog Talk Radio. It is 6 o'clock here in the morning, Thursday morning, April 28th. I'm glad to be here. This is One Child Abuse Survivor to Another. We're on for 30 minutes. It's a live internet streaming radio broadcast from blogtalkradio.com. I did pop the link into the chat room there, what we're talking about this week and last week, and that's web pages that I found dealing with the inner child, and Robert Burney is the author. And so, yeah, hopefully somebody's getting something out of this. I know I am. And it's great to have everybody tuning into my shows. I just appreciate everybody spending the time, to catch some of my shows. I'm not a counselor or a therapist. I say this on every show. I'm just a private citizen paying to do my blog talk shows. Mainly just wanted to be one more voice speaking out about abuse and the issues surrounding child abuse and also adult survivor issues. And so I'm talking about abuse on every show. So you have to listen at your own discretion. And, know what's good for you to listen to. It's ultimately your choice to listen. And if you feel that the topics might bother you, just, turn the show off because, it would not be offending me at all. And if you're a young person under the age of 18, I just ask that you have permission to listen to my show. And that's because I believe that children should be protected at all times. And I don't know how young the people are who are listening to my show. And it's ultimately about stopping child abuse, but there's a lot of adult content on my shows. So I think that children under the age of 18 or young people should have somebody listen to the show with you to make sure that it is something age appropriate for you to be listening to. And so we'll get right into this here this morning. It's quite interesting, this information from Robert Burney. And this is coming from healing.about.com. And the title of the web pages that he has are the website of Robert Burney and Joy to You and Me Prizes. And Robert Burney is a codependency therapist, a spiritual teacher, and the author of a book called Codependence, The Dance of Wounded Souls. And so he's compiled all these web pages here. So this is his work, Robert Burney, M.A. It says, we were looking at yesterday, inner child healing. How do you begin? Like, how do you begin the process, right? And then now today we're looking at why do it? Why do this work to get in touch with our inner child and whatnot? So this is his take on it, and it is quite interesting. He sort of goes back, and we were talking about this yesterday, just reading through some of his stuff here, and he goes through and explains that it's really not. It's just a real sign of a very unhealthy society, the way that people have brought up their children generation after generation after generation. He was taking a look at some of the Aboriginal peoples who raised their children in a lot healthier manner, in a lot healthier styles, and really didn't treat their children the way that a lot of the world treats their children. And even today it's a huge issue in our modern society that the children are just tools. They're not to be celebrated. They're just to be stomped on and stamped out their exuberance, and the child's spirit must be crushed in order to control them. That's what he's saying here. He says, like, children are to be seen and not heard, spare the rod, spoil the child. These are some beliefs from, especially the 1800s, 1800s, all the way even through to today. Many people feel that way about children. And so, it's really no wonder that we as a society have these very strange behaviors and strange belief patterns. And it's no wonder our society is really in the mess that it is in, right? It's absolutely horrific. I'm actually quitting smoking, so my voice is just going to be bad for a while because I'm working on quitting smoking, and which is a good thing, but it makes my voice horrible, so sorry about that. So he says it's only in very recent history that our society has even recognized child abuse as a crime instead of an inherent right of the parent. And the concept of healthy parenting as a skill to be learned is very new in society. So that's the thing. This is true, and I think a lot of times, just from the work we do at Dreamcatchers for Abused Children, and looking around at what is out there, the information out there, many people still think it is their right to abuse their children, and that's why children are being abused today. There's lots of people that don't think there's anything wrong with battering their child, verbally battering their child, emotionally, psychologically battering their child, physically battering their child, or sexually battering their child, and using their child for whatever purposes they want, using another child, even if it's not their own, for the same purposes. There's a lot of sick people out there who think it's just perfectly okay to do these things to children, and two of my parents were both two of these types who believed that it was okay to hurt their children, even though they were brought up on charges. It didn't change their minds on, even though the social workers were around and they were supposed to be going to counseling, the family was supposed to be getting some counseling, and the children were supposed to be getting separate counseling, and we were all, supposed to be getting help. And my parents went to 2 sessions themselves, and my older siblings went to 2 sessions on their own, and that was it, because my parents just put a stop to it. And the courts in the 1960s did not really come down on them. So even in the 1960s, it was very minimal help for people. And so you can imagine in the 40s and the 50s, when my mother tried to divorce my dad in Canada because of the abuse, the courts said no, because there was no infidelity. So therefore they could not divorce. So my mother was stuck with this man, and she was also she was an abuser too. I think she was abusing the children right from the start because she was abused, right? So both my parents didn't change their mind on how they saw their children or their family, and really treated us like we were just these inconveniences, right? And so and my parents weren't the type to be like, oh, you guys are just, all you children are just an inconvenience to us. They were cursing us, they were battering us, they were verbally, psychologically, emotionally battering us on a daily basis, if you know what I mean. It's like, and physically battering us when they decided to. So that's the issue. It's like a lot of parents just think it's okay to do this stuff to children, and it's really not. And then they wonder, society will wonder what's wrong with people after being programmed and conditioned that way as a child, and to try to come into any kind of healthy, really healthy behaviors is really difficult for people. So that's why our society is as sick as it is, and that's the truth. So it's only recently that human rights, really child rights, have even come into play as far as being written down on paper, and whether or not people uphold those really is a different story, because people kill their children every day, people harm and abuse their children every day, and even if they're not brought up on charges, doesn't mean they're not abusing their children. Many children slip through the cracks, and there's no charges laid, for whoever the abuser was, to bring justice, and to restitution to that child. And so many children are abused that nobody will ever know, unless they speak out. It's absolutely ridiculous, and it's really sick, and you can just see how incredibly twisted this society really is. So he says here, any society that does not respect and honor individual human dignity is going to be a society that does not meet the essential needs of its members. Patriarchal societies that demean and degrade women and children are dysfunctional in their essence. He says, we form our core relationship with ourselves and with life, and of course with other people, in early childhood in reaction to the messages we get from the way we are treated and the role modeling of the other people in our lives. So he says, we then have no training or initiation ceremonies, no culturally approved grieving process to help us let go of the old programming and learn a different relationship with ourselves and life. So we build upon the foundation laid in early childhood. So he says, as adults, we react to the programming of our childhood, and to contend with that our childhood emotional wounds have not affected our adult lives is ridiculous, he says. And he says, to think that our early programming has not influenced the way we have lived is to be in denial to an extreme. So, it's just by not taking a look at some of these negative things that we may have gone through. Not everybody, but some of us, have gone through. And to think that our past, dysfunctional behavioral role models didn't have an effect on us is another thing. You know what I mean? I know for myself, I really had to sit down and take a look at my behavior and think, well, why am I doing this and why am I doing that? And is it directly related to the way that I was programmed to think and believe as a child? And a lot of my stuff is. Even today, I recognize things that I do that are fear-based, fear-driven, just lack of trust, and even at work, certain thoughts that I'll have, or certain, things will come up, and I'll recognize that behavior in myself, and it's only because I'm really researching and studying and looking into this stuff, and actually looking into myself, right? And in order to learn, about our own selves, we do have to look inward, and obviously I do a lot of that every day. So I have started to recognize a lot of my the bad behavior stuff that I picked up from my family, right? And so I'm learning how to change that, right? Which is good because it's way more healthier. Attitudes are so much healthier. My belief system is so much healthier. Than what I was brought up to believe and what I was brought up to feel and think, right? So it is it's good, right? So it makes a huge difference in my life with relationships, whether it's in the workplace or my own personal relationships with people. It certainly has helped, because I don't no longer look at people, as if they're all out to get me sort of thing, and that everybody's just bad all the time, and sort of just wondering what everybody's motives are, even though really you can't trust everybody. You really can't trust anybody. Anybody can hurt anybody at any time if they so choose to do so. But then again, if you don't, like myself, if I don't open up and allow people who I feel are safe and who are good people in my life, I could be missing out on some great relationships and also just being lonely all the time, which is what I was doing before. Very particular about who I let into my life, and I still am. But, I want people to give me a chance. You know what I mean? If everybody felt the same way I did, nobody would have a friend and everybody would be walking around doing their own thing. And that's just a sad way to live. You know what I mean? So people have let me into their life and trusted me, and I thought, hey, I can do the same thing. But we do have to be careful. You really have to be very careful what you're doing and who you allow into your life. It's very important. I just, I don't know. You have to know how to set boundaries. And I do, really like to look into boundary work, because codependency and boundaries, that all kind of ties in together. And boundaries are very important for people who have grown up in abusive environments or dysfunctional, kind of codependent, abusive in homes or with people who were that way. Many times the boundaries just are not, the healthy boundaries are not set. So the child doesn't learn healthy boundaries. And so then as an adult, you have to go and learn that on your own, with the help of either some good books or a therapist or behavioral therapist or counselor or somebody. So it's harsh, really. It really is what people have to go through. But it's like it's like anything else. If you just keep on working at it, and just keep on trying, you come to some sort of truth. You know what I mean? And that's what I'm working on. But I like some of what he's talking about here. I think it's pretty good. He says that because society's standards for what constitutes success are dysfunctional, many people can be pointed out who have risen above, quote-unquote, their path to be success. It is those people who are supposedly successful that are running the world. How good a job do you think they're doing? So, well, he says it's our world leaders reacting out of the fear and insecurity of their inner children and the dysfunctional belief systems underlying civilization who give us war and poverty, billionaires and homelessness. That's quite interesting. But it's actually very true when you look at people's behaviors, what motivates people to behave a certain way. There's a lot of sick people out here in the world, and their motives are not necessarily for the good, and they're not necessarily out to do the right thing, and they're not necessarily out to help people, all right? There's a lot of people out there around the world hurting people, and whether it's in the government or whether it's just in your local community or whether it's in your home, you know what I mean? So that he's very accurate there. My book, Codependence, The Dance of Wounded Souls, evolved out of a talk that I first did in 1991. This is him talking, Robert Burney. He says, in the talk, I stated that I would like to one day make a bumper sticker that said, work for world peace, heal your inner child, quote unquote. I did have these bumper stickers printed when I published my book. It is, I believe, an essential truth. We will never have world peace or a civilized society which is based upon respect and dignity, to say nothing of love, unless we can heal our relationships with ourselves enough to learn to love and respect ourselves. And we cannot love our neighbor as ourselves as long as we are judging and comparing ourselves to them in order to feel good about ourselves. And we cannot have a society that meets the essential emotional, spiritual needs of its members as long as we are reacting to life in alignment with rulers of interaction that we learned in junior high school. So he says we are all connected, not separate. We all have worth and deserve to be treated with dignity and respect, instead of earning society's version of worthy by stepping on and stepping over our fellow humans, to say nothing of destroying the planet we live on. So he says it is through healing our inner child wounds that we can learn to respect and love ourselves, so that we can know how to treat others with respect and love. And he says it is through healing our inner children that can save our planet and evolve into a society that does not meet the essential needs of its members, or that does meet the essential needs of its members. But it's true, when you look around at why people hurt people, it's generally because they were hurt or they're hurting themselves, and that is very true. And just unhealthy belief systems, believing that they're right, the other person's wrong. My dad was like that. That's why he did not mind, doing the things that he did to his family, because my dad is borderline schizophrenic. And he just thought that his actions and behaviors were exactly true, exactly right. There was nothing wrong with him. He's a born-again Christian, and he believed that God would back him up and say that what he did to his family was perfectly fine, and that, the hatred and the marital rape and the abuse that he inflicted upon my mother, that was okay, right? And in his mind, he thinks that's fine, right? And then he thinks that the abuse that he put on my brothers, the physical abuse, the psychological abuse that he put on my brothers was just fine. Nothing wrong with that. Because, he's a man. He's a man, and he can beat on his wife. He can rape his wife. He can kick his sons around, and, this was years ago, right? But I witnessed it, so I was there, right? He can, and in his mind, he could justify this. He felt okay with it. See, he does not feel guilty. He doesn't have any remorse or any feelings that, oh, man, I totally screwed up and I messed my whole family up and caused my wife to be an abuser, because my mother really, I don't know, she just went insane. You know what I mean? Like, she became an abuser because her mother was abusive. And it's not an excuse. It's not an excuse at all. But it's what happened, right? She lost her entire whole being. She was soul murdered just as well as we were, but she passed on the cycle instead of stopping it. So unfortunately, but the thing is like, my dad just felt totally justified in what he did. And then when my mom died, he had this beautiful funeral for her, and he was walking around telling all the people at the funeral, oh, I just love my wife and all this. What a joke, And I was just like, I was sitting there just like biting my tongue. I'm like, okay, I'm not going to cause a scene at the funeral, you know what I mean? As it is, I laughed through the whole funeral because my mother was my main abuser, and I was just like, oh my God, finally I get some peace, you know what I mean? It pretty sad, but true, right? And so, a lot of people actually, one of my brothers didn't come to the funeral because he was going to kill my dad. He's like, I'll just kill him. There's no sense in me going to the funeral because I'll just kill Dad, because, there's so much. We saw what he did to my mother. We saw what he did to our family, you know what I mean? And we know the truth. But the thing is, he felt so justified, and then he would tell the whole public, oh, I loved my wife and blah, 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 I love my children. And then about, 10, 12 years later, I was talking to him on the phone. And he's telling me, oh, your mother was just a whore. She was a slut. I told him, Dad, you're going to talk to, you're going to say things like that. I will never, ever, ever talk to you again. You can guarantee that you will never hear from me ever again if you continue on and you ever mention or say anything about Mom again. I'm so tired of it. Like 12 years after she's out of the grave, he's still running her down. And I just, this is a sick man, but yet he's a born-again Christian. Everything he does is okay, right? Now, this is what's wrong with the world and the world leaders. Everything they can drop, gas. They can gas and kill hundreds of thousands of people, and it's okay, right? It's a belief system that is so unhealthy, so ungodly, and so damaging, and yet they think they are on the right side of God and that they are, doing the right things and that it's okay because they're sick in their mind, they're sick in their hearts, they're sick in their spirits, because that has nothing to do with love, And if we don't have love, we got nothing. So if we don't have love, we have hate. Can't serve two masters. You're either serving love or you're serving hate. And that's the whole issue. You got hatred in your heart. You can't have love in your heart. There's no room for both. You either have love in your heart and you have a good mind and a good heart and a good soul, or you have evil and only evil. And that's the only way it works. And I've had to learn how to switch my heart around because it was full of evil, full of hatred for my parents, for what they did, for my sibling, who abused me sexually, for my other siblings for not protecting me, for, all kinds of people, all kinds of things in my life. And I recognize that, right? Whereas a lot of people don't. My dad still thinks he's just wonderful, right? He's just the best person in the world. He's schizophrenic, so there you go. But it's sad. It really is. That people take on these attitudes. And world leaders are no different than parents who are abusing their children. World leaders are just people who have more responsibility because they have a whole lot of people they're looking out for. And they're, so I agree with what Robert Bernie is saying here completely. Absolutely. There's no way this planet's ever going to ever heal because people will not change their hearts. They will not change their minds. As far as stopping child abuse, I talk about this on my show all the time, especially on Dreamcatchers Talk Radio. And that's just because, parents, we're going to have to get people to change their minds about the way they treat children, right? We're going to have to get them to change their hearts. They're going to have to love their children. Oh, my God. You know what I mean? That's asking a bit much, isn't it? Pop a child into the world and then expect them to treat the child right and expect them to do the right things by their child, expect them to love their child. Wow. That's just asking way too much. You know what I mean? That's their responsibility. And that's what they should be doing from day one. But there's just so many sick individuals who have not healed their inner child, so they just go on, and it's like a bull in a china shop, just ruin everything, trash it all, trash their child. That's what my parents did, and then sit back and go, oh well, it's my right. I'm the parent. I can do whatever I want, and I'm the adult in the situation, and without even realizing what they've done is wrong. You know what I mean? How can you justify sexually using a child? There's no justification for that. How can you justify killing a child, beating a child to death, burning a child to death? There's no justification for that. You can't justify that. You can't make that right. So this is a sick society, and this is a sick world, and it always has been, and it always will be, because we can't get people to change their hearts. That's exactly where it comes down to. So, I love what Robert Burney has to say here about that. I'm definitely going to get a hold of his book, because I think he's really taken a good look into this and got to the very inner core of what is wrong with every single human being on this planet at any given time. It's hatred. That's all it is. Evil hatred. It has not. It's not a whole. It's not rocket science. It's not rocket science, and yet we can't solve it because people will not change their hearts. They will not take a look at their behaviors, take responsibility for their actions, and say, look, I guess I have been really bad, you know what I mean? Based on my programming, I need to change my ways so that I don't hurt people. And if everybody did that, this world would be a better place, right? But nobody will do it. Only a very small handful of people who want to see change and who within themselves, their own lives and their own world, microcosm world as far as their own lives go. As far as trying to get even one city or one town to change their mind, you can forget that. You can't even get a block of people to change their mind. You take one neighborhood in one city, and you say, okay, one street, everybody on this street, let's all change our minds. Let's all have a heart full of love. Let's care for our children and our families. Let's care for our neighbors. Let's do the right thing. You know what I mean? Let's be good to each other and help each other, especially within the family, but you can't even do that, right? You will find that every single one of them has hatred in their heart at some point. And some will even say, oh, no, I love everybody, but when it comes down to it, if you hear the conversations in their mind, you would find out very much differently. They're still judging people. So honestly, we have to, I'm telling you, it's got to be a change of heart, otherwise it's no good. And so for myself, I didn't want to be like my parents. I could see that. I was like, oh man, I've been programmed by these two abusive monsters, you know what I mean? So, I need to change the way that I'm doing things if I'm going to have a healthy life, you know what I mean? If I'm going to have a healthy existence, because I was brought up to hate. I was encouraged. You know what I mean? My parents were hateful people, and they basically were turning us into them is what they did, right? And so, my whole family and all of my siblings were like that. I only have a couple of people left in my family now, and they all they're very dysfunctional, codependent, and everything else. And are they healthy and happy? Definitely not. But they do the best they can. But it's just like myself. I'm willing to take a look at this and change my own behavior so that I don't pass this garbage off on somebody else. I don't have children, so there you go. But the issue is I wanted to heal and be healthy myself, because I recognized that I was so screwed up from what my parents had programmed me to believe and to think and to feel as a child. And I thought, oh my God, I got to get in touch with that. I've got to take a look at it and turn it around and go the exact opposite way. Turn that hatred into love and turn that self-hatred into self-love and self-nurturing and turn, because that's the whole fuel and root of my addictions and my anxiety and my issues and my problems is all trying to get my inner child work done, to take a look at the behaviors, and the programming that was put on me. So that's the issue. If the world would do that, this would be a much better world. So he says, inner child healing is not some fad or pop psychology. Inner child healing is the only way to empower ourselves to stop living life in reaction to the past. He says, we have been ignoring history and repeating it for centuries. If we are going to have a chance to reverse the self-destructive patterns of humankind, it is going to come from individuals healing self. By healing our inner child wounds, we can change the world. So he says, work for world peace, heal your inner child. I like that. I just like what he has to say there. But that's pretty, I mean, I think that he's right. And I think that there's some truth in that. You know what I mean? You think about these people like any one of these psychotic people out here who are causing these issues and these wars, you know, like you know, what's his name, Bin Laden and all those people, those people over there, those religious extremists who are out there hurting people. So no, I don't think there's anything wrong with a religious extremist if they're out there promoting love and they're not hurting people. People can be as extreme as they want to be if they're not hurting people, whatever, they're having a good time. But you get these people that want to squash people and put people under their thumb, you know, for whatever reason, whether it's just political or religious or whatever, you got problems, right? And it's like, I don't care, people can be as religious and happy and healthy and whole as they want to be. As long as they're not hurting people or hurting themselves, then and it's their belief system, well, whatever. You know what I mean? I'm a Christian, and I'm a big-time Christian, so there you go. I want to preach the Bible, and I actually just signed up to go to take associates in biblical studies, mainly for myself because I just love it. But you know what? I'm not out hurting people with it. You know what I mean? I'm not sitting there saying, if you don't conform to this, you're not going to be my friend, and I won't have nothing to do with you, and you know, that kind of stuff. And I'll just you know, do terrible things to your family, and this is what these religious people are doing out. Those crazy people in like Afghanistan and all that. It's like, you know, you have to conform to our ways, or we'll just wipe your whole civilization out. Well, the Christians used to do that too, you know. But everybody's had a chance. Everybody's had a turn. Take a look at it, man. I mean, everybody since time began has had their time in the sun of wiping out and annihilating people and being completely evil, right? And that and you take a look back through history, you can see that everybody has had their turn. Every country, every tribe, every nation. There hasn't been one nation that hasn't been in power and hasn't crushed another nation, ever. Right? We've all had our turn in the sun to be as evil as we can possibly be, and that's really sad. I mean, when you take a look back, I mean, I think everybody should be forced to study that stuff so that they can learn how evil mankind really has been from the time began, and that there has always been a few individuals who are willing to not be that way, you know, and for whatever reason. You know what I mean? It has nothing to do with Christianity. It's just that they have this internal healthy way of looking at life and looking at helping people and keeping love in their heart and loving their children, treating their families right. There's always been somebody out there who's willing to do the right thing, which is great because they're the example for us. They're the example for the rest of this screwed up world that ever was, to see that there has been good people out here all along. I've met many. I've met lots and lots of good people who have done right by their families, done right by their children, and had a huge impact on my life. To be able to see some good people with good stuff in their hearts and good stuff going on in their lives, just normal, everyday, loving people, kind of showed me how that is a reality. You know, because my reality was completely different. You know what I mean? I grew up completely twisted. So, you know, it's important for people to realize this stuff. You know, we have to, we can't change the world, but we can change ourselves. And by doing so, you know, we can then let go of some of these really unhealthy behaviors and recognize that with other people too, you know, and then we can kind of know where to set our boundaries, what we're going to allow in our lives, you know, and then we're not going to allow people to mistreat or abuse us as adults. As children, we really couldn't do anything about that. But as adults, you know, we have the choice, and we have this is our right. You know, it's our human rights. It's our rights to have a good life and to have good people in our life, right? And so whatever you do, make sure you do get some help, and even if it's self-help, but, you know, you hang in there, and if you're having a hard time coping, you know, I always say this on every show, it's so important, you know, you stick around and you get some help, and if you have to, call anonymously, call a crisis line, you know? There's no harm in that, and those people are out there on those crisis lines are people like me, people like other people that just want to help people, right? And there's not a whole lot of money in that, so they're doing it because they want to, and maybe they've lost somebody in their family, or maybe they were abused themselves. So it's very important, you know that there's people out there to talk to. If you can't get a hold of a friend, you phone the crisis line. You do whatever you have to do, but you stick around with us. I'll be back on tonight on Dreamcatchers Talk Radio, as well as tomorrow morning, same time, same place. Have a great day, everybody. Talk to you soon.